We are going to get started right now. So, I got to tell you something. I'm just going to make this a quick confession, and I'm just going to put myself out there. I'm patient. I think my wife's here. She could tell you, Patty, am I a patient man? But I love Homer. And I love Achilles, and I do not like Hector. And it's very difficult for me to have conversations and friendships with people who do not like Achilles. I've threatened, I'm a head mentor in the CiRCE apprenticeship program, and this year I actually told Andrea Lipinski that I was quitting and I'm not coming back because I'm just so over people not liking Achilles. So that's my starting. That's where I'm coming from right off the bat. I just want you guys to know that, and then, well, you just do with that with whatever you're gonna do with that, which probably means you'll just make fun of me a lot after this. But it's fine. I'm used to it. It's actually my love language is sarcastic mockery. So if you tease me and make fun of me, especially publicly, then it's my love language, and I will love you more for it. Right, Wes? All right, so I want to talk about where glory comes from, with that weirdly worded title, "From Whence Cometh Glory," and kind of talk about glory in Homer and glory in Paul, and do a little bit of a comparison there. But I mean, honestly, I'm an apologist for Achilles, so we're mostly going to talk about Achilles here. I just straight up tell you that. But before that, I want to tell you something interesting that I learned about glory in preparing for this, and something interesting about Odysseus. And, those are the two kind of big Homeric heroes, right? Achilles is the big Homeric hero in the Iliad, and Odysseus is the big Homeric hero in the Odyssey. And actually, Plato has a dialogue called Hippias Minor, or Lesser Hippias, in which the discussion is who's the greater hero, Achilles or Odysseus. It's very interesting. It's short too. You can read it quickly. It's a very interesting dialogue, and the conclusion. Well, I won't spoil it, like as if you could spoil Plato. I won't spoil it, but you should read it. It's interesting. So I'm not going to talk about who the greater hero is because we all know that it's Achilles. But I do want to talk about this thing that's interesting to me about Odysseus. So the two of the words that we commonly use for glory, or that we use when we're talking about glory, are doxa and kleia. And I think doxa, as I understand it, is the glory that or it's the credit for glory, or something that comes from the other person, right? That it comes to a person from another, and then kleos or kleia is the glory that goes out. It's like your fame, your reputation, right? That goes out to the world. And Odysseus's mother's name, does anybody know what it was? Was Anticleia, which does literally means anti-fame, like without fame, not fame. But his nursemaid's name was Eurycleia, which means broadly spread fame. So Odysseus, the hero, is raised by two women. He is the man he is today, in his day, because of two women. One who is anti-fame and one who is broadly spread fame. That Odysseus, the man who grows up under the training and the mothership or whatever of the mothering of these two women, is the same man who, when he comes home to Ithaca, comes home hidden as a beggar, and then reveals himself as the king of Ithaca, right? And so even in his homecoming, you see both mothers, both women, the influence of both women being represented in his return, right? He comes home anti-Kleia, hidden as a beggar, but then he reveals himself with the bow and everything as Eurycleia, and his fame is spread widely and broadly. So that's kind of cool. Homer's kind of cool. Odysseus is all right. No, I'm just kidding. I love Odysseus. I love Odysseus. I get asked the question often, which is the greater, which of the two is my favorite? Or usually people ask me which of the three, but Aeneid's not really a contender. Which of the two books is the greater, or my favorite, And I always struggle to answer the question because the answer was whichever one I had read most recently. But I think I realized more recently that I think the Odyssey is actually my favorite of the two epics, but Achilles is my favorite of the two heroes. And so that was confusing to me, like why would I have two different choices there? And so I could never figure out which one was my favorite, but I think that really is it. Anyways, you guys didn't come here to hear about my favorites, so let's go on. So what is glory? And here's a thing, that a struggle I think that I have had in the past. Glory feels like a bad thing for Christians, right? Like I'm supposed to be humble. I'm supposed to have humility, and glory seems like me wanting to not have to be humble, and so then here we are at this conference contemplating glory, but I feel like I'm supposed to be contemplating humility and meekness, and these two things are mutually exclusive. Glory and humility appear to be mutually exclusive. But I've worked with Andrew Kern for a long time, and I've picked some things up from him along the way. Not as much as he's picked up from me, obviously, but a few things here and there. And I don't know that they have to be mutually exclusive. If we can think about them rightly, and we think about them in the context of we'll get there, of who needs the glory and who's giving it. One of the things that is clear is that God wants glory and deserves glory, and we're created in his image, and we're imitators of God. And also God seems to want to give out glory. I don't know, in Matthew chapter 3, God says to his son, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." And what son doesn't want to hear that from his father? And what son ought not hear that from his father, right? Like am I not going to tell my son that I'm pleased in him because he might not have humility afterwards? I don't know. That just seems wrong. I don't know. It seems like I would be doing something wrong to withhold that sort of comment, sort of statement about my son. My sons, I have two. And then in Matthew 25, right, you get the statement in the parable, right? "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." It seems like saying "well done," or "this is my beloved son," or "in whom I am well pleased," or "good and faithful servant" are expressions, statements that we're supposed to make and that people ought to hear. Romans 13 basically straight up commands us to do that, right? In Romans 13 it says to give honor to whom honor is due, to give respect to whom respect is due. And there it's talking about pagan government. I mean, it's talking about Rome and Nero and those guys, right? And I mean, all the layers, but they're part of those layers, right? But we're to give honor to whom honor is due, to give respect to whom respect is due in Romans 13. And so that seems to be a part of the Christian ethic, a part of what's expected of us. And then, of course, in John 17, the great high priestly prayer, Christ prays or says, "The glory which thou, the Father, has given me, I have given them." The Son has received glory from the Father, and he's giving it to his people, to his children, or to his disciples, to us. So glory is something that God is giving to us. So in some sense, I think it's safe to say that we were created for glory. we were created to hear the words, "This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased." We were created to hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant." We were created to receive the honor that is due, but we're also created to give all that out, right? And that's I think where we need to go, and where we can help make sense of this. So I think humility and glory are not mutually exclusive, but there's some sort of harmonizing that needs to be done between them, some sort of modulating or reconciliation that needs to be done between them. On that note, I want to turn to Achilles, and then kind of present what glory looks like in Achilles and in the Iliad. And I'll tell you this: I read the Iliad in a historical context. I'm not trying to read the Iliad as if I have no context for myself, right? The Iliad has come to us through history, within a context all the way up, right? So the very first people to ever hear Homer recite the poem had a context, and then that context has developed and grown every century thereafter. And the Iliad has been received into the Christian tradition and has been read in light of that Christian context. And I am reading in that context. So certainly the objection could be made that I'm Christianizing Homer. Maybe. But Homer has come to us through Christianity. So that's part of what it is. That's part of how we have to receive it. We have to understand it. You guys, some of you might already know this. This was something I learned from, what's that guy's name from Idaho? Wesley's something, Callamore. Anyways, some guy that I've seen online, he told me this story once about Julian the Apostate. So this guy's the emperor, like 2 or 3 emperors after Constantine legalizes Christianity. And he wants to revive paganism, Roman paganism in the empire. And he literally wants these guys worshiping Jupiter and Juno again. And in order to revive paganism and prevent the spread of Christianity, one of the laws that he passes is to make it illegal for Christians to teach Homer. And now we willingly abandon it, and we just hand it out. We cast it aside because it's pagan. But Julian the Apostate, the pagan, had to take it away from us because of what Christians were able to do. And then Saint Justin the Martyr has some pretty incredible arguments in his writings. He's got one, a hortatory address to the Greeks, and another one where he's arguing how Homer actually prepared the pagan Greeks for Christ, right? So all of that is this part of this context in which I'm reading it. Nonetheless, here's what I think Homer has presented us in the Iliad. So the book opens with this dispute, right? And the text tells us very clearly and very plainly that there's a dispute between Achilles and Agamemnon, and that dispute they were brought into conflict by Apollo. So Apollo brings these two men into conflict, and in doing so, the will of Zeus is accomplished. So there's something going on there with the gods. That is all of that is happening at the same time as these real men are in conflict with each other. So there's this thing up here, and then there's this thing down here. We're going to focus on the thing down here. But here, the conflict looks something like this. They went and attacked a city. They took prizes from that city. We should understand prizes here as booty, figuratively and literally. They took prizes. They took, gold and cauldrons, and they also took women. And these prizes then came back to the camp, and then they were given out to the heroes, to the warriors, based on their rank and their fame, right? Their contributions to the battle. One of those prizes was the daughter of the priest of Apollo. The priest of Apollo goes to them and says, give me back my daughter. They say no. He offers them a ransom. They say no. The priest of Apollo goes to Apollo and says, hey man, they took my daughter. And so then Apollo brings a storm. And men start dying. Lots of men start dying. And then this goes on for 9 days, and then the Greeks are like, oh, hey, what's going on? We need to figure out why this is happening so we can make it stop. And then one of the prophets says, well, I know what's happening, and I can tell you how to make it stop, but I'm not going to tell you because Agamemnon's going to get mad, and then I'm going to get in trouble. And then Achilles says, no, I got your back, bro. And so then the guy's like, okay, here's what happened. And then he tells them, and then Agamemnon, and then they say, you have to give back your wife, your bride, your prize. And Agamemnon says, no. And then he says, if I give back my prize, then I want a replacement, right? So there's this whole trying to give, or the prize has to go back. I'm going to skip over some stuff for a second and then come back to it. But the prize does go back. There's the conflict because Agamemnon gets his replacement prize from Achilles, right? Then Achilles withdraws from the battle. And then the Greeks are back at war with the Trojans without Achilles' help and without the help of the Myrmidons, his men. And then people are dying. And then Agamemnon's like, this stinks. Let's go get Achilles back. And then he goes back and he says, hey, I'll give you all this stuff. Come back. So there's this wooing that takes place. Achilles refuses for a long time and then doesn't. And then he comes back. All right. That was the short, quick overview, right? So here's the thing. You have this dispute and you have this conflict about these prizes. The difficulty is that is like how all this happens, like how it unfolds, right? So you have Agamemnon being told he has to give back his prize, and then Achilles, who has been put into this position of conversation with Agamemnon because of the situation with the prophet now. So Achilles is like a spokesperson all of a sudden. And then Agamemnon says, I will give back my prize, but if I give back my prize, I need a replacement. And then Achilles says, well, that's not possible because all of the prizes have been given out. It's not like we have a storage shed back here holding leftover prizes, and then we can just give you something from that. And Achilles actually says, Agamemnon demands a replacement for losing CiRCE. Achilles says there is no store from which to select a new prize. Then he says, just return her and we will give you 3 to 4 times more than normal when we sack Troy. To which Agamemnon says no. Then Achilles says, then Agamemnon says, I'm going to take a prize away from somebody else and keep her. And Achilles says, that's never been done before. It is unbecoming to call back gifts once given. When I was a kid, there was a name for that, but I don't think you're allowed to say it anymore. And Agamemnon says, I'm doing it. So Achilles is saying, this has never been done. You can't do this. This is irregular, outside of the norm. And Agamemnon says, yeah, but I'm doing it. And so, but here's the thing, right? Achilles does not enter into a conflict over Agamemnon because of his prize. That's not what's happened yet. Achilles enters into a conflict with Agamemnon because of a prize. All Agamemnon says, I am going to take somebody's woman. And then he says, it might be yours, it might be Ajax's, it might be Odysseus's. I'm taking somebody's woman. And Achilles says, you can't do that. That is irregular. It is unbecoming. And then Agamemnon says, it's yours. Just for that, I'm taking your bride, right? And so we read this and we think Achilles is upset because he's got this woman that he has lost. But he's actually upset because the norm for glory is being overturned by one man who does not have the authority to make such a change. I mean, in the Greek way of life is being completely overturned by Agamemnon's decision. And that's what Achilles is standing up against. Then Agamemnon makes it about Achilles' bride. Then Achilles, well, he kind of gets sucked into it, right? Because you do find, from that point going forward, you do find Achilles arguing against it by saying, but I won her with my own hands. She's mine. I earned her. and there is an argument. I mean, there is a way that he expresses the argument where even in his own defense of himself, it does kind of get reduced to her as this prize. But it doesn't start there. And there's a question too, like, is he reducing the argument to her because of the nature of Agamemnon, right? So like in Greek and in early Christian thought, you have this idea of the human being with these kind of three parts of the soul, right? Where you have the belly, which is what desires pleasure and comforts, like gold and silver, money, food, drink, sex, stuff like that. And then you have the chest, which desires honor, glory, right? And then you have the mind, the nous, which desires wisdom and spiritual things. And Achilles is clearly a honor-driven man, but Agamemnon's not. Agamemnon's a belly-driven man. He wants prizes. He wants women. He wants sex. He wants gold, right? That's what he's interested in. So then when you're trying to persuade a man like that to understand your point of view, you have to bring the argument to his level, right? And for Achilles to make the argument about spiritual matters or intellectual pursuits and wisdom or honor is to make arguments that are over the head of Agamemnon. He has to reduce the arguments to Agamemnon's level and to give Agamemnon to speak Agamemnon's language. So I think there's something like that going on with Achilles when he does kind of turn the argument into, but my girl that I won with my own hands, right? I think he's speaking Agamemnon's language at that point. So this is what Achilles is stepping into, right? Agamemnon's going after the entire Greek way of life when it comes to the battlefield and glory and honor, and Achilles is standing up against that. And then it gets turned into a personal thing where I'm going to take this woman away from Achilles. So Agamemnon breaks the rules, but he's not just breaking the rules, he's completely changing them, overhauling them, right? But there's a problem now because Agamemnon is the king of kings. So what do you do with that guy? What authority does he have? And then Achilles is just a cool warrior. I mean, he's a king, but he's not the king of kings. And he's just the guy that wins. He's big and strong and powerful, right? And that's it. He has power and strength, those kind of achievements, but not king of kingness. And in reality, in real life, we have this, right? This distinction between glory and honor based on my role and glory and honor based on my rank. And the distinction I'm making there is my role is the position that I've been put in by God or by my boss or by whatever, right? So my role is as husband or father or COO or teacher or pastor or whatever, right? Agamemnon has the role of King of Kings, and he literally has that role because he bears the scepter of Zeus, right? That makes him the King of Kings. But Achilles has it based on his rank or his status as the greatest warrior. So he's not been assigned a certain amount of glory and honor. He's earned glory and honor by his activities, by his actions. So there's this ascribed glory and honor related to the role that one has been given, and then there's this achieved glory and honor that you have based on how you rise up in the ranks as a warrior, right? So Achilles is greater by his achievements, by his rank as a warrior. Agamemnon is greater by ascription, by his role, the role having been assigned to him as King of Kings. Those two things are coming into conflict. This is what they have to decide. Which glory and honor is the greater? The one that's assigned or the one that's earned? This is part of the conflict that they've been brought into. So Achilles, of course, appeals to his rank. I'm greater than you. I kill more people than you. I don't hide. You do. I'm better in every way. And then Agamemnon makes the alternate appeal. No. I'm the King of Kings. I have the scepter of Zeus. My father ate his nephew, or whatever, right? He didn't make that argument, actually, but that kind of did happen. So he makes his appeal to his role as King of Kings and the right of the scepter. Achilles is greater because he is the greatest hero warrior. Agamemnon is greater because he has the scepter of Zeus. That's what they're doing. That's how they're making the argument now at this point. So what are they doing? They're talking right past each other, right? They're not even speaking the same language. And they're just... So then Agamemnon, this all happens because Agamemnon has broken the rules. He's overturning the Greek way of life with respect to glory and honor. And Achilles is defending it. Achilles attempts to prevent Agamemnon's transgression before it becomes personal for him, before it's his own prize that is being threatened. So his defense is a defense on behalf of all of these Greek warriors. Odysseus, Ajax, the other two that were explicitly named, right? And then everybody else. Although most of the other guys knew he's not really going to come after my bride because the prize Odysseus has got, she's way hotter than the one I got, right? I mean, like, they know, like, they know that the choices really are limited, so the little guys don't really care. But not all of them, right? There's the one guy, Thersites, is that his name? Yeah. Thersites, he comes right out and he says, you're an idiot, Agamemnon. And then, you know what happens to that guy? Yeah, Odysseus beats the snot out of him because he violated, I think, this is interesting to me. I need to develop this idea further, but Thersites violates the relationship between a man of his level and a man of Agamemnon's level. And Odysseus beats the snot out of him for it. But here's the thing. By doing that, so Odysseus beats the snot out of Thersites for speaking out against Agamemnon to Agamemnon, but he's speaking out about the situation with Achilles. But by beating him, he's acknowledging that the roles are being, he's basically saying that Thersites is breaking the rules in a way that's not dissimilar from the way Agamemnon was breaking the rules. But here's the conflict, right? Like, if you're on Agamemnon's side, you can say, yeah, he's beating Thersites because Thersites was wrong about the Achilles situation. But if you're on Achilles' side, you can say, yeah, he's beating Thersites because Thersites is violating the social norms in the same way Agamemnon violated the social norms, and that Odysseus is actually supporting both men simultaneously by beating Thersites. But I need to develop that further. I'll be honest with you, that one's a little bit slipperier in my head. Anyways, so Achilles also, in defending the rules, Achilles also recognizes that Agamemnon is doing to him, or what he would have done to any of the other men, but it happens to be him. He's doing the same thing to him that happened to Menelaus with Paris, right? Paris comes along and takes Menelaus' bride, and they all have to go to war for it. Agamemnon is now taking Achilles' bride. And what? How is this consistent with the way we view these things? And Achilles recognizes that. Thersites recognizes that. He makes an appeal to that in his argument. And so the very reason they're all there, it's not happening to them. To them. And what do? How do you respond to that? And so Nestor comes along, and Nestor says, Agamemnon, don't do it. Don't take his prize. You're making a mistake. Do not take the prize. And then Nestor, because he's a good, wise counselor, then turns to Achilles and says, don't withdraw from the battle. You're making a mistake. Don't withdraw from the battle. Men are going to die, right? So he gives the advice that each of them needed to hear, I think. But he is acknowledging that Agamemnon is doing something wrong. So then Achilles decides, I can't put up with this anymore. This guy has crossed the line. You know what that means. I'm a warrior. What do warriors do? And he reaches for his sword, and he starts to pull it out, and then, boom, Deus ex machina, or Dea ex machina, because it's Athena. Athena appears on the scene, and she's like, whoa, 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 put that back, buddy. Hey, little guy. She didn't say that. I don't know how he would have taken that. But she convinces him to put his sword back. And this is what she says. Do not kill him. But you can talk all the smack you want. Now, which is interesting because later on, Achilles does continue to talk smack. And Agamemnon says, who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to talk smack to me? And Achilles is like, Athena. You didn't know that, though, did you? Achilles doesn't say that, but we readers, we know that, right? We know when Agamemnon says, who gave you the right to talk to me like that? We all know. Athena did. Loser. So there's that. But then the other thing Athena says is, stay away from the fighting. She tells him to stay away from the fighting. You can abuse Agamemnon verbally, but you cannot kill him, and you need to stay away from the fighting. And that's where the conflict is, right? So Achilles does that. He withdraws from the fighting because the entire Greek way of life with respect to glory and honor and warriors on the battlefield is being called into question. Then we can fast forward all the way to book 9, and we get the moment of repentance, kinda, by Agamemnon. So Agamemnon gets this counsel from Nestor. Nestor says, hey, let's send a delegation to Achilles' camp and get Achilles to come back. And Agamemnon says, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And so then Agamemnon puts together this entire prize package, the big prize package. Like, I'm going to give you whole cities. I'm going to give you women, more women. I'm going to give you my daughter. Coincidentally, Eva Brand says that the daughter that Agamemnon promises to Achilles is the daughter that we learn elsewhere was the one he sacrificed to get there, which means either that was not a part of the tradition when Homer wrote this, or Agamemnon's super tricky because he's like, hey, I'll give you my daughter, the dead one. I probably lean towards it was not part of his tradition, but it is part of ours now. So, but it would be super tricky if Agamemnon's like, yeah, you can have my dead daughter. You can marry her. So that happens. So he sends this entire prize package over, and Achilles is there. This group of men show up, and Agamemnon lays out exactly word for word what he wants Odysseus to say. Odysseus is the speaker in the delegation, this one who speaks on behalf of Agamemnon. And Odysseus gives his presentation, Agamemnon's presentation, and he makes two changes. One of them is really important to what we're talking about here. So in Greek, there are two words for man. Well, there's probably more than that, but there's two words here that are being used. One is on air, and it's the word that means male, masculine, man, right? And then the other one is anthropos, which means human, male or female, right? Just human being. But in Homer, aner, andros, means it's only ever applied to the heroes. Like you would never call the cobbler back home an andros or aner. You would call him an anthropos. But you can call Achilles, Agamemnon, Odysseus, Ajax, you can call those guys aner or andros. And they, with one exception, you can call them that, and you can never call them anthropos, because anthropos is what you call the normal guys. Never call a hero anthropos, unless you're calling the hero anthropos in relationship to the gods. So I can say, compared to Zeus, Achilles is anthropos, but I can never say Achilles is anthropos and Agamemnon is andros. That would be disrespectful. That would be a slap in the face. So Agamemnon writes a speech. Speaks a speech. In the speech, he calls Achilles anthropos. So he's basically calling Achilles a little guy, little man. But Odysseus gets there, and Odysseus says andros. Odysseus changes it and calls him a hero. So there's something going on there where like Agamemnon is trying to repent, like he wants to get Achilles back, but he doesn't really believe that Achilles is worthy. And he gets this little slight, this little kind of smack in the face, poke in the eye. But Achilles doesn't know about it because Odysseus is clever, they say. And Odysseus hides it from him. So that happens. But then an interesting thing happens in Book 10. In Book 10, this is the spy delegation, right? So there's a spy being sent to go check out what the Trojans are doing. And they cast lots, and the spy that gets picked is Diomedes. And Diomedes is young and brash and awesome. And Diomedes is like, yeah, I'm going to go, and I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go kill a bunch of Trojans in their sleep. And then he says, but I don't want to go by myself. Can somebody go with me? But he says it like very Ecclesiastes like. He says, well, two chord, full, whatever, it's two are better than one, and we can watch each other's back. And he says it very, philosophically and wisely. And then they're like, yeah, pick somebody to go with you. And so then Diomedes is like, okay, who am I going to pick? And before he can pick, and here, this is the thing, right? Diomedes is looking at all the heroes in front of him, and he can pick any one he wants. So he can pick Menelaus, he can pick Odysseus, he can pick Ajax, he can pick the other Ajax, he can pick anybody he wants. And Agamemnon says, before he can pick, but before you pick, keep this in mind. You should pick the person who's the best warrior, not the person who is the highest in authority. And Diomedes is like, yeah, good call, Odysseus, come with me. And Odysseus says yes. Now, up till this point, every argument Agamemnon has made is that the greater person is the person with the highest role, the highest ascribed glory, until his brother's life is on the line, until Diomedes might pick Menelaus. And when that's about to happen, Agamemnon says, you should pick the guy that's the greater warrior by prowess, not by role. And then he does. He picks Odysseus. And in that moment, we might get the very first taste of Agamemnon really repenting about what he did to Achilles and acknowledging that Achilles might have an argument about what's the greater glory in the greater position in those two places, right? So you get that. But it's I mean, we're reading between lines here, so, I get it. So then they go, the spies go, well, of course, back to book 9, the delegation makes all of its pleas. Achilles says, no, I'm not coming back. I can't come back. I won't come back. And I got 99 problems and Agamemnon ain't one. I'm done. I'm out. I'm going home. I'm leaving. Look, I'm already loading up my boat. I'm out of here. And then he doesn't go anywhere. Interesting. And then the delegation occurs. And then after that, it's just battle after battle after battle after battle after battle until Patroclus comes along and says, Patroclus, of course, is Achilles' best friend, unless you read weird literary critics and then they're lovers. And they go through, they have this conversation, and Patroclus says, look, man, we need to get back out there and help them. And Achilles says, no. And then Patroclus says, well, what if I go, but I wear your armor? The Trojans will think I'm you. They'll be scared. They'll run away. We'll win. And then Achilles says, okay, but don't go too far. There's a limit. You can't go past this limit. And he has some reasons for it. One of his reasons is, you'll take glory away from me. But he gives his reasons. And then he gives him the armor. Patroclus puts it on. And if you've not read the story, you might want to leave. But you can't really spoil Homer. But you need to know. I mean, this is the heart-wrenching moment because Patroclus has to die. And when Patroclus dies and they're fighting over his body, Menelaus says they're fighting over Patroclus's naked body because the armor that he was wearing has been stolen by that Hector. And Hector has stolen the armor, and he's still trying to steal the body. You know why he's trying to steal the body? You know what he says why he's trying to steal the body? Why he wants that body? So he can drag it behind his chariot in the dirt. But then a little bit later, Achilles is going to do that to Hector, and we're going to get mad at Achilles for it, even though he's just doing what Hector said he was going to do. But we all love Hector. Oh, Hector, he had that one scene with his son, and it was so cute and adorable, and we all love him. Put that thumbs up down. But then we somehow forgive Hector for wanting to do it, but then we get mad at Achilles for doing it. Anyways, so they're fighting over that body, and Menelaus says, we have to do this for Achilles. And then all of us who read this and think Achilles is a big whiny crybaby and we hate him, we read that line and we just ignore it because it doesn't make sense to us. Right? It's like seeing a supernova in the sky and not believing supernovas are possible. You just don't know what to do with it, so you just pretend you didn't see it. That actually happened in history. Wes can tell you all about it, actually. So there's this line when he says, we have to do this for Achilles. And all of us think Achilles is a big whiny crybaby, and that by leaving, he was destroying the Greeks. And so then it doesn't make sense to us, is why is the Greek guy whose world is being destroyed by Achilles and all of his friends are dying because of Achilles, why is that guy saying we have to do this for Achilles? Unless maybe Menelaus understands Achilles' behavior differently than we do. Maybe it can make sense for us. Nonetheless, Achilles stays out until Patroclus's dead body is returned. And then he decides he's going to go back. And then his mother comes to him and says, no, you have to stay out of the battle a little bit longer because you don't have any armor. You know who has it. He who shall not be named has your armor. And so Achilles has to go and wait, but he can't. So then there's this awesome scene. You'll just have to read it for yourself, though. And then Achilles goes back. And we have to ask the question, why did Patroclus have to die? Zeus's will? Yeah, but then, we're trying to, bring this stuff down here and explain stuff. And I'm not a big fan of saying, oh, it was okay that he did that because the gods made him. I don't think that's really how we're supposed to read it and understand it. I think we need to know what's going on up there, but I don't think we can use it to excuse behavior that happens on here. I don't think anybody in these epics does anything against their will. I think the gods are always working in accordance with what they really wanted and just nudging them along the way. But anyways, so it might be Zeus's will, but not in the sense, I don't know if it's in any sense it wasn't supposed to happen except Zeus decided and then now it had to happen. I think it might have had to happen for this reason. If Achilles really did make this conflict about, if the conflict really was about the fact that Agamemnon was completely destroying the Greek way of life and glory and honor on the battlefield, to return to the battle for any reason associated with Agamemnon giving gifts would have been to grant Agamemnon the authority to give gifts, to give and take. The very thing that I think he's fighting against in the very beginning. So if in book 9 he says, all right, I'll come back. That's a pretty good haul. I'll accept it. Then he just gave Agamemnon the very authority he said Agamemnon did not have 8 books earlier, whatever. I don't think it was possible for him to return. I think Athena told him to stay out. His mother told him to stay out. And his mother's not an overprotective, overbearing helicopter mom. We're talking about a goddess, right? The mother told him to stay out, and it was because Zeus had a plan for his life. Zeus had a plan for him, and he's waiting for that moment. And now it's here with the death of Patroclus, where he can return to the battle, and it has nothing to do with Agamemnon and everything to do with his friend. Everything to do with now how Zeus is going to give him the glory and honor that he really deserves. That's what's happening, right? That's the only way I think it could have happened, and not have changed the original reasons for the conflict to begin with. It happens there, but unfortunately for us, that means Patroclus died, and that's sad because Patroclus is pretty amazing. Even Briseis, the bride that Achilles lost, he loses her pretty quickly, within 10 days of getting her. Even she weeps when Patroclus dies. She lived with Patroclus for 10 days, and she wept for it when he died. What does this mean? I think it's helpful for us to not understand glory as an evil, but as a good, right? Something God wants to give to us and something that God wants us to give to others. And I think glory is received from others, but only one gives honor and glory truly. That one is God. For us as Christians, that's God. For Achilles and the Greeks in the Iliad, that's God. It was Zeus. Zeus was the only one who could really ultimately give the true glory and honor that Achilles deserved. The conflict in the Iliad is that glory came from the gods, from Zeus, through men, and through this one man, Agamemnon, who is willing to play fast and loose with the rules. who was willing for his own sake to break the rules, to flip the rules, to change the game. Achilles tries to protect that way of life by preventing it from happening, and then Zeus has to step in a way that brings about more death and destruction to protect that way of life. That brings in more chaos, more death, more pain for everybody, right? Especially for Patroclus. So what we want to do, if we're gonna make this comparison then between what we get in the Iliad and in Homer and what we see in Scripture and in kind of the Christian approach to it, right? There's still the two sides of that coin. Sometimes I'm the recipient of glory, sometimes I'm the giver of glory, right? Sometimes I'm the one giving honor to whom honor is due, and sometimes I'm the one hearing, well done, thou good and faithful servant. And I think it's helpful for us to make that distinction and then kind of create rules for it or whatever, principles to guide us, right? So if I'm the hearer, if I'm the recipient of glory, I need to live my life in a way, I need to approach life in a way where I only ever really need it from God. If God blesses me by giving it to me from other people, then I just give thanks, right? But it comes from God. And I definitely need to be careful not to go around demanding it. Like, I did something great today, Wes. Why haven't you told me? Right? Patty, I took the trash out. And I don't, you didn't say you love me. So what's going on? You don't respect me? We need not to be demanders of it. If I'm the giver of glory, I need to give that glory liberally, willingly, to all who deserve it, without flattery, and I need to do it in a way where I'm not making judgments about what they'll do with it. You know, there's a conflict sometimes that I think that we can see in the church fathers and in American conservatives. I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but as good conservative capitalist Americans, when we think about things like charity and welfare and stuff like that, we're trained to think about it with respect to, well, if I give them this, then I'm just creating laziness, right? And there's this question that comes up there. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, obviously, the argument, right? Just for the sake of a comparison here. And then in the church fathers, they'll talk about that, when you encounter somebody who's poor and impoverished, you just give to them. Just to when you see that need, you satisfy it if you're able. You satisfy that. You don't say, if I give this guy $5, is he going to go buy a beer with it? That's not my role to ask that question. I give. That's how the church fathers describe it. If I can just use that as an analogy here, right? I give honor and respect to the person to whom it's due, and I don't ask, what are they going to do with this? If I tell him he did a good job, is he going to get a big head about it? If I tell him he did a good job, is he going to go tell everybody that I told him he did a good job? Right? And then I start worrying about all this stuff, and then I think, nope, I got to protect this guy from his arrogance. So I'm really looking out for his soul. So I'm going to not fulfill my responsibility to give honor to whom honor is due, but I'm doing it for him, to save him from his own arrogance, right? And I think we need to not think about it that way, right? And then we give glory and honor to whom it is due because God has called us to do it. And we do not take away glory from somebody that is due. And that means also not ever withholding glory especially means never withholding glory from somebody to whom it is due in order to increase my own. And that's, I think, the big sin we see in Agamemnon. Agamemnon made a mistake when he refused to return the priest's daughter. And then the gods made him pay for it. Apollo made him pay for it. And then Agamemnon said, if I have to give back my prize, I've lost glory. So I want more. And the only way I can get more, as Achilles pointed out, there is no great storehouse. There's no drive-through that we can go to get another one, right? There's no great storehouse of prizes. The only thing you can do is take one away from somebody else, and that's not done. And Agamemnon says it is now. The only way Agamemnon could get his glory back, he thought, was to take it away from somebody else. Achilles must decrease so that I might increase. That's the game that Agamemnon played. And Achilles couldn't let it happen, and we can't fall into that trap. We're more likely to do wrong with glory and to do wrong with humility by playing that game of trying to say, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to share it, I'm not going to share it, I'm only going to share a little bit, I'm going to get more for myself, instead of just freely and willingly and liberally sharing it with those to whom it is due. We're more likely to fall into this trap, I think. So humility is the willingness to go without glory from anyone but God. As Christians, that's how we need to do it. I need to be willing to just forego it. That's what Agamemnon should have done. Okay, here, give the priest his daughter back, and I'll just wait. I'll just wait until God rewards us with the destruction of Troy. And then, just like Achilles said, I'll get 3 to 4 times as much. But he couldn't. It's the willingness to go without glory from anyone but God, and the willingness to receive glory when it's offered by another, but just to receive it with thanksgiving. Humility is the willingness to give glory to others and to do so without trying to teach them a lesson. And we should willingly and gladly be willing to say to others, this is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. Well done, thou good and faithful servant, thou good and faithful friend, thou good and faithful wife, thou good and faithful husband, thou good and faithful child, student, teacher, whatever it is, right? The willingness to gladly say that to those who deserve it. That's humility. And that's how we can protect ourselves from the kind of glory that's arrogance and makes us scared as Christians to not be meek and humble. Is to actually just be more free with it. So, thank you. I hope you all love Achilles better.